Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's lecture, we are going to cover the introduction to the tissues, classification of the tissues, and particularly we are going to cover the first tissue, that is epithelial tissue. In epithelial tissue, we are going to discuss it in detail, the classification, where it is located in the body, and what are its main functions. So without wasting any time, let's get started. But before moving to the definition of the tissue, we should know the structural organization of the human body, that is how human body is formed. We should start from the basic level, that is atomic level. Atomic level like such as hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and so on. So atoms combine to form molecules. These are atoms, these are molecules, and we call it as chemical level of organization. And it is the simplest level of organization. When we move forward, the complexity increases. So when molecules combine together, they form cells, and we call it as cellular level of organization. And in human body we have approximately 200 types of cells. So when similar cells combine together, they form tissues with extracellular matrix. So we call it as tissue level of organization. When different tissues combine, they form an organ, and we call it as organ level of organization. And in organ level of organization, we have different tissues. Like this is the example of stomach. We have this muscular layer. This is the muscular tissue, and we have another, that is epithelial tissue. So we have two different tissues that form an organ. We call it as organ level of classification, and these two tissues have common goal, that is digestion. And when different organs combine to perform a particular function, we call it as organ system level of classification. Example, digestive system, like liver, GB, pancreas, they help in digestion and absorption. And we called it as, this is the common goal, and we called it as, this was organ level of organization, we called it as organ system level of organization. It is organ system level of organization. LOR is level of organization. So after level of organization, when multiple organ systems combine, they form an organism, and this is the highest level. We'll write it here. This is the highest level of classification. So atoms combine to form molecules. Molecules combine to form cells. Similar cells combine to form tissues. Different tissues combine to form organ. Organs combine to form organ system level of classification. Organ systems combine to form an organism, and this is the highest level. This is the simplest level. And in human body we have approximately 80 organs. We have 200 types of different cells, and cells are independent structural and functional units of life. Now coming to the actual definition, what actually the tissue is. A tissue is a group of structurally similar cells together with small amount of extracellular matrix that work together to perform a specific function. Every tissue is specialized for one or more function. What does this mean? When we have similar type of cells, this is one cell, this is another cell, this is another cell. These are structurally similar cells. When they combine together with some extracellular matrix, these are cells and this is some extracellular matrix. When they combine, they form tissue. So what actually the tissue is? Tissue is a combination of extracellular matrix and structurally similar cells, and they perform a specific function. Now they can perform one or more functions. So what tissue is? A tissue is a group of structurally similar cells together with small amount of extracellular matrix that work together to perform a specific function. Now what are some common tissues? Muscle tissue, it helps in contraction. Nervous tissue carries impulses. Connective tissue supports the body. And what is epithelial tissue? It covers the body or organs or body cavities. So these are general functions. Now coming to the classification of tissues. Now in classification we have four major types. That is, we have epithelial tissue, we have connective tissue, we have muscle tissue, and we have nervous tissue. In today's lecture we are going to focus on epithelial tissue. What epithelial tissue is, what are its characteristics, and what is the classification of epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue is a sheet of closely packed cells. That is, the cells are close together that covers the external surfaces of the body, lines internal organs and body cavities, and form glands. So if I have to break the definition, I can break it into two parts. First is, it covers the external surfaces of the body, lines internal organs and body cavities, and forms glands. So epithelial tissue, what it does is, either it covers the body surfaces, lines internal organs, or lines body cavities. Another is, it form glands. So this is epithelial tissue. Either it covers the body surfaces, it lines the internal organs, or it lines the body cavities, and it forms the glands. Now coming to the characteristics of epithelial tissue. First is, the cells are tightly packed. Means if this is the epithelial tissue, the cells of epithelial tissue are tightly packed. That is, they are close to one another. Second, they have a little matrix. That is, they have a little extracellular matrix. When cells are close to one another, there is a less space for extracellular substance and extracellular matrix. So there is a little extracellular matrix. Third is, they are avascular. They are avascular means they have very low blood supply. For example, this is the skin and it is made up of epithelial tissue. If you scratch the skin, you will not bleed until you go into the dermis. So this is the epidermis. So it has low blood supply. You will not bleed until it went to the dermis, where there is a rich blood supply. So cells of the epithelial cells have very low blood supply, and so we call it, they are avascular. Third is, but they have rich nerve supply. If you scratch, you will feel it, or if you touch the hot object, you will feel it, because it has very rich nerve supply. And it has high regenerative capacity. Means if epithelial tissue gets injured, for example, if you have any injury on your hand, it will heal within few days because it has high regenerative capacity. Now coming to the polarity of epithelial tissue, that is the surface of the epithelial tissue. For example, अगर मैं human body की बात करूँगा, we have anterior side, we have posterior, we have superior, and we have inferior side. These are the sides of human body. Similarly, epithelial tissue के भी कुछ sides होते हैं. For example, if this is the epithelial tissue, these are the cells of the epithelial tissue. They are close to one another. They have little extracellular matrix, and they have three surfaces. एक तो ये है, for example, these all are lateral surfaces, and they have apical surface. Apical surface is either it faces towards the lumen. For example, अगर ये stomach की बात करूँगा, this is the epithelial tissue, so it faces towards the stomach, so it faces towards the lumen. Similarly, small intestine में भी ऐसा है. और अगर हम heart की बात करेंगे, it faces towards the chambers of the heart, towards the chambers of the heart. And अगर आप surface की बात करें, it faces towards the external environment. So apical layer क्या है? It either faces the lumen or external environment, जैसे skin है. Lateral layer, one epithelial tissue is connected to another by tight junctions, gap junctions, desmosomes. So laterally, one epithelial tissue is connected to another by tight junctions, gap junctions, or desmosomes. And we can say that the epithelial tissue lateral surface faces another epithelial tissue's lateral surface. Now coming to the important one, that is the basal surface. Let us cover it here. That is, epithelial tissue rests on the basement membrane. So I have already told you, this is the epithelial tissue. These are our lateral surfaces. They face one another. This is the apical surface. Either it faces the lumen or it faces the external environment. Now coming to the basal layer, that is, it lies on a basement membrane. So basal layer, it lies on the basement membrane. So what is basement membrane? It is formed by two layers. One is basal lamina and another is reticular lamina. What actually this is? For example, if this is the epithelial tissue, and it have a basement membrane, and we have connective tissue. The basement membrane has two portions. First is it has basilar lamina and it has a reticular lamina. So the basal lamina is formed itself by the epithelial tissue, and the reticular lamina is formed by the connective tissue. So this is epithelial tissue, this is connective tissue. The portion that is formed by the epithelial tissue itself, we call it as basal lamina, and the portion that is formed by connective tissue, we call it as reticular lamina. Now coming to the polarity, it has three surfaces. It has apical surface, it has lateral surface, and it has basal surface. And almost all epithelial tissues lie on a basement membrane, and it has few exceptions as well. This basement membrane, it anchors the epithelial tissue, as well as it supports the epithelial tissue, as well as it connects the epithelial tissue with the connective tissue. And as epithelial tissue is avascular, diffusion occurs, diffusion of oxygen, diffusion of nutrients occurs through this layer, that is the basement membrane between epithelial tissue and connective tissue. It has two layers. One is reticular lamina that is formed by connective tissue, and another is basal lamina that is formed by epithelial tissue itself. Now coming to the functions of epithelial tissue. It provides protection, absorption, secretion, filtration, diffusion, excretion, and sensation. Now coming to the classification of epithelial tissue. First of all, we should go back towards the definition. That is, it covers the body surfaces. Yes, it lines the internal organs and it lines the body cavities, and it forms the glands. Based on this, we have distinguished epithelial tissue into two. The first one we called it as surface epithelium, and which forms glands, we called it as glandular epithelium. So we have two types of epithelium. Classification on the basis of function. If it covers the body cavities, if it lines the body organs, or it covers the body surfaces, we call it as surface epithelium. Or if it forms the glands, we call it as glandular epithelium. That is, it is specialized for secretion. Now coming to the first one, that is surface epithelium. Now surface epithelium is further divided on the basis of number of layers. If it is formed of single layer, we call it as simple epithelium. If it has two or more layers, we call it as stratified epithelium. So first we divided the epithelium on the basis of function. If it covers the body cavities, if it lines the body organs, or if it lines the body cavities, we call it as surface epithelium. Or if it forms the glands, we call it as glandular epithelium. Now, if the epithelium, if the surface epithelium has single layer of cells, we call it as simple epithelium. If it has two or more layers, we call it as stratified epithelium. Now coming to the cellular shape. If it has squamous shaped cells, that is, it has flat cells, we call it as squamous epithelium. If it's cube shaped cells, we call it as cuboidal epithelium. And if it has columnar shaped cells, column shaped cells, we call it as columnar epithelium. So we have two main types. First is simple epithelium, another is stratified epithelium. Now combining this simple epithelium with the shape of cells, we have further three types. That is, we have simple squamous pavement epithelium, we have simple cuboidal epithelium, and we have simple columnar epithelium. Coming to the first one, that is, we have simple epithelium, single layer of identical cells found in absorptive and secretory surfaces, and it is not suitable for stress. So this is simple epithelium, single layer of cells found in absorptive and secretory surfaces, and it is not suitable for stress. Coming to the first type, that is simple squamous pavement epithelium. Where it is located? It is located in the heart as endocardium, in the blood vessels as endothelium, in the lymph vessels as endothelium, as well as in the alveoli and collecting duct of nephrons. So where simple squamous pavement epithelium is located, it is located in the heart, it is located in the blood vessels, lymph vessels, alveoli, and collecting duct of nephrons. Coming to the second, that is simple cuboidal epithelium. That is, it is a single layer of cells but cube shaped cells. Where it is found? It is found in kidney tubules and it is found in thyroid glands. What is the function? Remember, C, that is secretion, excretion, and absorption. So this is second type. Third is, we have simple columnar epithelium. Simple, we have single layer of cells, column shaped cells, and it is a epithelial tissue. These are tall thin cells and it lines many organs, but it has some variations. It has some variations. Like in stomach, it is simply the simple epithelium, simple columnar epithelium cells, but in small intestine it contains microvilli, which increase area for absorption. In trachea, it is accompanied with cilia and goblet cells that secrete mucus to remove foreign particles from the upper respiratory tract. In fallopian tubes, it also have cilia. What it does, it moves over to fallopian tubes for fertilization. So it has some variations as in small intestine, trachea, fallopian tube, and stomach. So this was all about simple epithelium. Now when we look at this simple epithelium in microscope, sometimes the cells of simple epithelium appear like this. They have basement membrane. For example, this is the epithelium. This is the basement membrane. Okay, this is a reticular lamina and this is basal lamina. This is formed by epithelial tissue itself and this is formed by connective tissue. Now all cells, what they does is they touch the basement membrane. When they touch the basement membrane, but they do not reach to the surface. That is, they either do not face the body cavities or lumen of the body, but they touch the surface, this basal surface, and it appears to be multi-layer. That is, it has nucleus at different levels, but this is the single layer. So we call it as pseudo-stratified. It is not actually stratified. It is not two or more layers. It is simple epithelium, but it appears to be stratified. We call it as pseudo-stratified. So this is the one point that I have written here. See, what is pseudo-stratified? It appears to be stratified, but it is not actually pseudo-stratified. That is why we called it as pseudo-stratified. Pseudo means false. Now coming to the, if we have two or more layers of cells, if we have two more or more layers of cells, we call it as stratified epithelium. Now stratified epithelium, what it does, it has several layers of cells, and cells, what they does is they divide in basal layer and they are pushed upwards, then they are shed. Means this is the epithelial tissue, for example. These are several layers of epithelial tissue. What they does is they divide, basal cells are pushed upwards, and the upward layers are shed there, and it repeats, the process repeats itself. Now coming to, it has two main types. First is it has stratified squamous epithelium, while another has transitional epithelium. And stratified squamous epithelium has further two types. It has keratinized and non-keratinized. What is this? Stratified squamous epithelium composed of several layers of cells. In the deepest layers of the cells, they are mainly columnar, and as they grow towards the surface, they become flattened. That is why it is called as squamous. They become flattened and are then shed. Means it is composed of several layers of cells. The cells in the deeper layers are usually columnar, but when they are pushed towards the surface, they become flattened and they are then shed. Now it has two main types. One is keratinized and another is non-keratinized. Keratinized, they contain special protein, we call it as keratin, and this keratin provides waterproof protection. So where should be it located? It is located in the hair, skin and nails. Coming to another type, that is non-keratinized. What non-keratinized does is it protects the moist surfaces, prevents drying. And where it is located? Where it is located? First, it is located in the eyes, that is conjunctiva. Second, in the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, vagina. Then coming to the transitional epithelium, and it is also called as urothelium. Why? Because it is located in the urinary tract. These are several layers of, we have pear-shaped cells, and it allows stretching as urinary bladder fills. So transitional epithelium, where it is located, it is also called as urothelium. It is particularly located in the urinary bladder, or we can say it lines the urinary tract, and it has pear-shaped cells. It allows stretching as urinary bladder fills. So this was all about surface epithelium. Now we have glandular epithelium, that is, it is specialized for secretion. Now, before moving to the classification of this glandular epithelium, we should remember the definition of a gland. What actually the gland is? A gland is a collection of epithelial cells specialized for producing and releasing secretions. So a gland is a collection of what? Epithelial cells specialized for producing and releasing secretions. Now coming to the classification. Classification में क्या है? It has several classification. For it has we can classify it on three types. First is by destination of secretion, that is how they secrete. First is endocrine and exocrine. What is endocrine? These are ductless glands. They release hormones directly into the bloodstream. That is, they don't have ducts. That is, they release the hormones directly into the bloodstream. We call them as endocrine. Example क्या है? Pituitary gland है, thyroid gland and adrenal gland. Coming to the exocrine, they have ducts. They release secretions onto the epithelial surface or into the body cavity. Example, salivary glands, sweat glands and sebaceous glands. So this was the first type of classification, by the destination of secretion, either endocrine or exocrine. Endocrine are ductless glands. They release secretion directly into the blood, while as exocrine glands have ducts and they release secretion onto the surface of epithelial tissue itself, or they release the secretion into the body cavities. Now coming to the second classification, that is by mechanism of secretion, that is how they secrete. First is we have merocrine, then we have apocrine, and then we have holocrine. So in merocrine, what it does is secretion occurs by exocytosis and cell remains intact. That is, if this is the cell, secretion occurs here, and when it is secreted, it is released either into the bloodstream or directly via ductus. So it is released by exocytosis, that is, it is removed from the cell by the process that is called as exocytosis. And it occurs in salivary glands, it occurs in pancreas and acrine sweat glands. What are acrine sweat glands? Acrine sweat glands are those glands that are present almost everywhere in the body, and there are millions of acrine sweat glands. For example, they are present in the forehead, they are present in the palms of hands, they are present in the soles, almost everywhere they are found, and their secretions are thin, or we can say watery secretions, and they mostly contain water and electrolytes. Now coming to the apocrine. In apocrine glands, they have the apical portion of the cell pinches with the secretion. For example, this was, for example, this is the cell, and it has, this is the apical portion. Secretion occurs, it moves to the apical portion, and this apical portion, what it does is it pinches off. It pinches off along with the secretion. So the apical portion of the cell pinches off with the secretion, and when cell have to secrete another secretion, first off it has to regenerate the apical portion, then it secretes the substances, and then it does again the apical portion of the cell pinches off with the secretion. So example is mammary gland, and we have apocrine sweat glands. Now apocrine sweat glands are located at a particular location, like they are located in the armpits, that is axilla, they are located in the areola of the nipple, and they are also located in the perianal area and genital area. Their secretions are thick. It is mainly composed of lipids and proteins, apocrine, and when they secrete this sweat, it is usually odorless, but when bacteria metabolize it, then odor comes. So first it is odorless, you should remember these things. Now coming to the holocrine. In apocrine, you should remember the word apo, that is the apical portion of the cell pinches off with the secretion, and in holocrine you remember the hole. In the entire cell breaks down to release its secretion, that is, for example is sebaceous glands. So what happens in holocrine glands is, when cell secretes some substance, it secretes continuously until the cell bursts off. When cell bursts, and it releases its secretion. Example, sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands, they are associated with hair follicles, and they prevent drying, and they have some mild antibacterial function as well. So this was all about by mechanism of secretion. This was all about second classification. Now coming to the third classification, I have not written it here, but I will tell you. This classification is based on the types of secretory cells. If we have one type of secretory cells, we call it as unicellular glands. If we have more than one type, we call it as multicellular glands. Unicellular example, for example, we have this goblet cells. What they does is they secrete mucus. And in multicellular, for example, we have pancreas. Pancreas has different cells. They have alpha cells, they have beta cells, that is islets of Langerhans, and they secrete insulin, they secrete glucogen. So this is another classification. So you should remember the classification of epithelial tissue. So that was it for today's lecture. We have covered the introduction to the tissues, and we have actually covered the epithelial tissue. And in epithelial tissue, we have covered the classification of epithelial tissue. If we have to classify, for example, the epithelial tissue, we will cover based on where it is located. If it is located in the glands, or it forms the glands, we call it as glandular epithelium. If it covers the body surfaces, if it lines the body cavities if it lines the body organs, we call it as surface epithelium. And surface epithelium we have further divided. If it is single layer, we call it as simple epithelium. If it is 2 or more layers, we call it as the stratified epithelium. And based on the cellular shape, if it is squamous, we call it as squamous epithelium. If its cells are cube shaped, we call it cuboidal, and if cells are column shaped, we call it as columnar epithelium. Now then we have combined these things, and we have first type, that is we have simple squamous pavement epithelium. That is, it is single layer of cells, and cells are flat. Where it is located? It is located in the endocardium, endothelium of blood vessels. It is located in the alveoli and collecting ducts of nephrons. Then we have simple cuboidal epithelial cells, and it is located in the kidney tubules and thyroid glands. What is the function? SEA: secretion, excretion, and absorption. Then we have simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium, these are the tall, thin cells, and it lines the mini organs, such as stomach. It lines the small intestine. It lines the upper respiratory tract, and it also lines the fallopian tubes. And it has some modification, as in small intestine it has microvilli. In the trachea it has cilia along with the goblet cells. In fallopian tubes it also has cilia to move the ova towards the fallopian tubes for fertilization. So if we have 2 or more layers of the cells, we call it as stratified epithelium. And in stratified epithelium we have stratified squamous epithelium, and we have this urothelium. We call it as transitional epithelium. And in stratified squamous epithelium we have keratinizer. That is, it is found in where? It is found in the hair, skin, and nails. It provides waterproof protection, contains a protein, keratin. And we have non-keratinizer. It prevents the moist surfaces such as mouth, pharynx, esophagus, etc. And then we have transitional epithelium. It is mainly present in the urinary tract, and it allows stretching of the urinary bladder, and the cells are pear-shaped. Then we have glandular epithelium. That is, it forms the glands. What actually the gland is? It is a collection of epithelial cells that produce the secretion and that release the secretion. Then we have classifications. We have 3 classifications. First is the destination of secretion. We have ductless, that we call as endocrine glands. We have ducts, that is exocrine glands. They release secretion on the surface or in the body cavities, and they release secretion directly in the blood stream. Then we have mechanism of secretion, how it occurs. We have apocrine, we have merocrine, and we have holocrine. Then on the basis of number of secretory cells, if we have only single type of secretory cells, we call it as unicellular glands. If we have more than one type of secretory cells, we call it as multicellular glands. So that was it for today's lecture. If you find this lecture useful, do like the video, subscribe the channel, and share it with your friends and classmates. I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.